All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Sabo?
Wheel of Time episode. We are on Winter's Heart, and apparently we've got a lot of Elayne to get through,
Yeah,
and politics and other things. I put some pretty well. One of them's not very negative. I put Outlive up there because she has to not die in this episode, and then we got some Nietzsche and Machiavellian stuff up there because that's how this storyline goes.
well, I hope you have thoughts because my brain is mush right now.
Yeah,
Just
it depends on how far we get.
well, we start with our favorite topic of this section of the series, the Sea Folk and the Kin,
Unrelated.
Chapter 8.
I hit the Twitter right before you got on, and there's a poll that came across my feed, and the question is: have you ever decided to lower your ideal partner preferences, example, shorter, less educated, lower status, etc., after being rejected by someone of the opposite sex? And it's over 100 votes and everything. It's male is pretty much 50-50 because you can answer yes, I'm a male, yes, I'm a female, no, I'm a male, no, I'm a female. 50-50 would or would not lower their standards. Female is always no so far. So we'll see. Date Psych just reposted it. That's why it came across from me. So it'll get thousands of more votes. I wanna go check on that again later. But
Intriguing.
that might be a fun topic for later if the poll stays that way.
Not incredibly surprising. All right. So we start with Elayne and politics and meeting with
We don't
basically
we
the
don't start with the Sea Folk. We got a chapter before that, I thought.
I thought
We
you're
start from
right.
the
The
can.
streets of
Yeah.
Camelin.
Yeah.
Okay. I had skipped ahead to Seafolk and Kin, which is chapter 8, which is the one I
Well,
thought we were on.
we're almost skipping ahead because there wasn't much to this, but there is one important point. Okay, so she's out trying to get the feel of their people and be seen in public, politics in general. I think the main points from this are this is where Jordan kind of gets stuck in his Red Sonja days, kind of.
Hmm.
And yes, I'm all about powerful women and yay, powerful women, but the guard of all women, I'm sorry, the equal number street toughs is going to come in and be able to take that out. She does make mention a little later that it is kind of ceremonial and for show, but she also still makes mention later she's dependent on them for her safety. So
Hmm.
it is kind of Jordan kind of getting over his skis there and basically
Yeah,
writing Red Sonja in every woman.
he he does a good job of rationalizing it, but that doesn't mean that it's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
you can have a rational argument and still be wrong. Uh, so he does kind of go out of his way to rationalize it, and it makes sense in part.
Now, on the flip
Um,
side, something that happens here in just a little bit, we'll get to, and it's not spoiler, but I want to get to it in the due order. It makes something else a little bit more believable, which is the guy sliding in as the captain of that.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I don't remember what I was watching the other day, and uh, I got in a little bit of trouble for saying, yeah, I don't think so. If I was being generous when I said if a 120-pound girl threw a kick at me, I don't think I'd feel it.
I've been kicked hard by girls before. That being said, equal sized male has put a welt on my leg for 3 weeks versus
Mm-hmm.
ow, that kind of hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to overcome physics.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've got here's the best evidence of our little position here on this topic. Okay, overlapping bell curve, standard disclaimers. Yes, the weakest male would probably lose to Ronda Rousey, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but we have Fallon Fox to prove us right. As bad as that situation is, we've got a male equal weight, has to weigh in for these things, equal weight to everybody he fights. She fights. Let's not get canceled by YouTube. Everybody she fights, plus puberty blockers, testosterone blockers, and everything, and still is cracking women's skulls. And it's not.
Literally.
I saw one that was actually kind of close, but other than that, that was it's not even a contest. So we've got the most female you can make a male going in there and beating up the most male women that you could possibly have. Masculine, I should say. Use the right term there. Masculine women you can have, and still the biological male is winning.
Hmm. Yeah, it at least he goes out of his way to make these not your stereotypical what I was grumbling about, which was, 110, 120 pound girl that looks like a wayfish model is, taking down 6 foot, 200 pound stuntmen. No. So at least Jordan goes out of his way to make it as believable as possible with these big burly Brienne of Tarth women.
Yeah, well, and into Nynaeve's point later on, it is beneficial to have these kind of bodyguards in situations like you're in your bath or you're in your changing room or all these places where having a male guard would be
Hmm.
improper for a queen. That's okay, especially if you have them in enough numbers that they can handle an assassin or something.
Hmm.
But to have them as your only guard is it's taking it a little too far. And if anybody wants to argue about how not progressive Jordan is, well, here you go. There's your chapter
Hmm.
right there.
I will say though, again, he does a good job of rationalizing it, even if he is a bit over his skis. And one of the points he makes, without making it directly, because Jordan rarely makes a direct point, which is why it's engaging writing, is there is something to be said for aggressiveness. That, like this, the lead one here, Cassell, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
She's a merchant's guard, a long time merchant's guard, so she has no problem thumping someone over the skull and knowing where to hit, knowing when to hit, and being the first one to throw the strike.
Mm-hmm.
Because that matters for a lot as well. And that is something that where, you're not allowed to say, which is it's one of the reasons men are better fighters is because they're naturally more aggressive. You
Yeah,
have to you have to be at on the other end of the bell curve if you're a woman to have that aggressiveness, and the women he's talking about here clearly have that aggressiveness.
good point. And then I guess the other big point from this is, well, I like what's the Aes Sedai here, Saritha.
Uh-huh.
I like her as a character, and her and Birgitte talking over Elayne about Elaine's escapades outside
Mm,
of the palace was fun.
yep.
The comment of young pretty women think they can just put mud on their face and they won't stick out to young men is
Hmm. Yeah, we
it
kind of
ruins
noticed
many,
things.
many a Disney tale.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, we'll get to it when we get to it, but it is setting up some of the frustration with Elayne of, you know, being taught a lesson but not learning a lesson
Mm-hmm.
is one of the frustrations with Elayne. That phrase just kind of came to me as I was sitting here thinking about it of, oh, she's going to be taught a lesson with what Saritha and Birgitte are talking about here, but she never really learns the lesson because she keeps doing this crap. Um,
Yeah, and this is somewhere that a lot of authors and modern movie makers especially get wrong when they're writing women. Not that I'm a woman and I can speak for this, but you just from observations, I work with a lot of women. Uh, they get wrong being stupid and getting away with it with bravery.
mm,
And she was stupid and ended up surviving the situation, and she's equating that with bravery and doing the right thing versus she needs to be listening to her advisors that are like, no, that actually was dumb and you were
mhm.
lucky. Okay,
Um,
a woman that could write women, Annie Duke, I should have put it up, Thinking in Bets. That's exactly her thing. What did okay? So I won this hand. Was it dumb luck or was it something I did? And I need to take notes on what I did.
mm,
Or I lost this hand even though it looked like I had every advantage. Was it something that was dumb luck? Or again, Thinking in Bets, was that bad luck or was that my fault?
Hmm.
And Elayne never learns the lesson of that was my fault.
Yeah,
Because
that's a good way to think
yeah,
about it.
realistically, the end result is she didn't learn anything. She's talking about going out in the town and getting the feel. All we get is her getting thumped in the head. Do we get something out of it? Was there something she benefited from that escapade with? No, there wasn't. She just got thumped on the head. That's it.
And it's extra frustrating because in other ways Jordan is so good at writing Elaine. I was looking for the somewhere in here there's a scene where Saritha she's giving money to children. And Saritha says you can't feed them all, and Elaine says children aren't allowed to starve in Andor. And it's clear she knows that's not true. It's clear she wants to believe that, but doesn't believe it because she has too much of a smart mind, but it's also clear that she wants it to be true.
Well, and we get the opposite of that in New Spring. Remember Moiraine's comments when she was in Shachin was uh rulers have always tried to bring everybody up, but it never works.
Hmm.
And is like, okay, well, maybe you needed that bug in your ear. Maybe Morghese knew that and you didn't, and she never got to that part with you.
Hmm.
That yeah, you want to help everybody. We all do. That's what compassion is. But you also have to realize not everybody can be helped.
And she can see that, and you can see the inner struggle there where she knows that, but on a political level, she still wants to try and help everyone else. But then that there's never really that dichotomy in her own self for her own self. The idea that, look, I know this is dangerous, but it needs to be done for these reasons. And instead, it's more of a, well, I'm just invincible. And it
Mm-hmm.
gets worse later for reasons. Um, all right. Do you have any other thoughts on this chapter?
Nope. Then see folk and kin.
Yay.
This one put a little bit of a twist on where it had been going just because of the Shanshan. But yeah, still annoying. And realistically, we don't have to deal with the sea folk here. They just make mention of them.
Hmm.
So it's actually a pretty loose title. It's just the fact that they're having to deal with them that got the title going.
Yeah, the title is making me think of something that happens later,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all kind of jumbling up on me here as I try and remember what's what.
And I
Uh,
don't think we need to beat a dead horse because we've not only in our own reading of the text, but also in comments to comments, have beat the sea folk
mhm,
horribleness and to they're basically they're crooked dealers and nobody stands up to them and says, "Oh no, that was a bad faith argument because this is our
mhm,
definition of teacher and
mhm.
this is what we agreed to." You needed to clearly define in the fine print what your definition of teacher was.
Yeah.
This is also how postmodernists win arguments, by the way. Think of the sea folk whenever you're arguing with a Wookiee.
Yep. Yep. Just
Their
change the
definition of
definition, don't
racist
default
is
to the
yeah is not
definition.
the
Yep.
same as your definition.
All right. Um, I don't mind the opening of this chapter. I think I've said this before. I'm fine with the political intrigue, and I like the way he writes it. Um, I like the way Elaine kind of pulls Mistress Harper into her inner circle almost on accident, just because she doesn't have anyone else, and she knows this is someone who's loyal and trustworthy. Um, where do we want to go first? Um,
I guess before we get to the kin, we get Vandine,
yes.
unless I'm getting ahead of you. Am I getting ahead of you?
No, that's yeah, we get to Van Dien here first. I think that's part of the kin, part of the title because she's with those two that have put back on white because they're runaways.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is where Nynaeve is growing. She's still kind of bitchy at this point, but I mean, the point that as soon as they put on white, Vandine and every other Aes Sedai got blind to who they were
Mm,
because they're so set in their ways. If you're a novice, you're a novice. You're not an adult. And I think Elayne even makes a comment in her head about how you have to get used to not being treated as an adult till you're an Aes Sedai.
Yeah, when
And
Vandine makes a face after calling them children because they're old enough to be Elaine's grandmother.
well, one of them didn't say about 400 years old.
Well, one of them was really old. I don't think one of these two. But she was, I can't remember which was which, but one of them was recognized as a runaway who changed her name.
Mm-hmm. That
And
was
then,
Zarya. Yeah.
yeah, after they said, no, this is who you are and you're a runaway, then the other one said, me too, you should, and that was the one that turned out to be way older. The first one was actually recognized by some of the Aes Sedai. Um, so I know they're significantly older. Um, and I believe this is where Lane makes the point, or was it Nyneave who made the point of they've got decades of experience not being seen by Aes Sedai while
She was over
navigating the
300.
world. Huh?
Page 216. She was over 300, older than
Oh yeah.
Vandine herself. Yeah.
Which
Kirstane.
it older than Vandine herself is saying something since she's one of the oldest still alive.
Yeah.
And this is where they say they've been puzzling out who killed Adelaus, and they've narrowed down the suspects.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to Nynaeve's point, they're not dumb.
Hmm. Yeah. So and instead of squashing it, the best way to get someone to think about a pink elephant is to say, don't think about a pink elephant. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to do that here. You're not just going to say, stop that. They can't. They've one of them for, I think, like 80 years and one of them for 300 years has been doing this. They've lived, especially the older one, they talk about the kin, they live multiple lives throughout their lives because they're so old, they have to move on and they change their name, they change their profession, they go do something else. So I mean, they're basically perfect spies because they've just been living it.
And also think of their position, because they were trying to fly under the radar, and they actively looked for people who could channel to make sure that those people didn't draw attention to them.
Hmm.
And so they had to follow context clues of who can heal better than the other wisdoms, and who can do this, and who's reading the wind a little bit better.
Hmm. Um, I where is it? Where is it where Nynaeve comes in? Oh, here at 220. I like the uh I like the continuing transformation of Nynaeve, that she comes in like a schoolgirl in love, because that's
Mm-hmm.
basically what she is. So she's all contentment and happiness, as soon as she learns what's going on, she turns into Nynaeve. And it's, oh no, you don't.
Well, I have a little beef here because everybody's talking about not being able to do these things because of how busy they are. Except she actually states why she was busy all morning. It was a little bit
Hmm.
of a personal matter. It wasn't the kin, it wasn't the sea folk, it was her husband. And yes, I understand that I
That's
would make
important.
time. I would make time for that as well, and it's important. But also, it's not part of my being busy.
Hmm.
It's my personal time.
But this, I believe, is this also the scene? No, it's later where Avienda and Birgitte also get kind of bullied by her. Um, and that part of the continuing transformation is, remember when they first were raised by Egwene, they were having trouble fitting into who they were supposed to be as Aes Sedai. And now that they've had time uh, away from that power structure and the politics of Saladar, Nynaeve is very easily fit back into her role as an authority figure because she was doing it for so long. This is kind of the evolution of her as a character, because this is something that she's been struggling and fighting with the whole series, because she is someone who, one, wants to be taken seriously and obeyed, but two, has a good deal of experience being in charge. And so she she wants to be in charge, but she also kind of needs to be in charge because she has something to offer, and now she's finally kind of slipping back into that role because she's able to here.
Well, that's part of her development in a way is she was she felt entitled to being in charge before, and she had to be humbled
Mm,
in order to come to her own, and now it's just naturally coming out that inner leader in her, the person who sees the situation that from a broader spectrum than a lot of people can, which is what she's becoming, is just coming out because she's like, what are you being an idiot about? This and this and this makes sense. Why don't you just do it? Whereas before, she was so blind to all of that stuff because she just wanted to be treated like an adult.
but here at the end of the chapter, when they get to the um talking about the Soldam and Domine that Rand sent them, everyone kind of, and you can tell by the way they all fall in line immediately, everybody knows what the right thing to do is here, but they're afraid to do it because of the potential
Mm-hmm.
downsides of letting these former Soldam loose. And the first time a Domine says, hey, or nope, I have that backwards. Other way around, strike that, reverse it. The first time one of the former leash holders tells one of the former leashed, hey, help me escape, are they going to do it? Or worse, start channeling and blowing people up because they're, I mean, they're living weapons. Uh, so everyone knows what is, especially the empathy of, you're all channelers. You can all uh, empathize. Some of you may have actually experienced it, like Elayne and Nyneave has actually worn the bracelet, and maybe even the collar too, from what I remember. So they know what it's like. But Nynaeve has to be the first one to say, "Well, of course we're going to do the right thing here."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she's the one that has to speak up and say, "Yeah, it's scary and maybe dangerous, but we're doing the right thing because it's the right thing."
And there's real life precedent for that. I mean, I've recommended it before, but listen to Yomi Park talk about getting to South Korea
Yeah.
finally after escaping North Korea, then being a sex slave in China, and then finally getting to South Korea. And the scariest part of it for her was when she was free. She
Mm,
started wanting to go back to North Korea because it was it was just so different of a world,
hmm
and she had no clue how to actually live. She had a only clue, the only thing she knew was being told how to be. And so that that's even less than being a dominate, right? So where you're actually a slave, but a slave that is made into an extension of your soul, Dan. You have no mind of your own.
mm.
You are an extension of the person on the other end of the leash.
Well, and especially if you don't know how the mechanic, I hadn't really thought of it in these terms before when we, way back when we learned how this works, but think about it from the end of that leash is if you have no idea how the mechanics of this work, so the good uh Soldam talk about how with experience they can uh they become more and more in sync with their domine, and they're able to almost see the weaves. Well, we know it's because they can learn.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on the other end of that leash there, then that has to seem like a kind of
They can read
um
your mind.
supernatural
Mm-hmm.
control. That's just an added level of reinforcing that you're basically a good doggy and this is your master holding the leash.
Well, what we've learned in book 2, when Egwene was in the leash, they can actually read your thoughts to some degree, because she would think about grabbing, her soul dam, and the soul dam would look at her and say, you don't want to do that. So they actually can read your, at
Hmm.
least emotions. It's probably something similar to a
It's,
water
yeah, I
bond.
think that's a similar thing is when you've had enough experience, you recognize what those emotions, what those impulses, what they mean is what I think was happening there because we get a little bit of that when they put it on Mohidian is there and you get it kind
They
of
can feel her
raw.
resentment, and
They
yeah,
can feel her resentment and then they kind of start to read into what that means.
yeah. And so now go back to Saki, back to these domain. They have to go through a process of actually being in a world where their thoughts can't be read. They're still in the mode of, if I even think something wrong, something bad is going to happen to me. So, the taking the leash off is the first step. But to the people that are afraid of its point, I would say they should be shielded for a while to at least be able to maneuver through the world as a free person. You just can't channel.
Hmm.
And then you can kind of earn your way back to that point once you've kind of assimilated a little bit more. It's you don't give a recovering addict or felon a gun right away, right? You let them live life and show that they can be a upstanding citizen for quite some time.
Hmm. And I was flipping back here, so we're going to get some more of this later, but the first two examples here, oh no, they do bring up Olivia here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so you've got your examples here of um Kara, who is a sort of wise woman on Tolman Head. And then Lamora is just 19, a pampered noblewoman with the extreme bad luck to have the spark manifest. And those two in different ways, Kara, because she was an independent woman in a position of authority, Lamore was a spoiled woman in a position of authority. You know they're going to reflexively resist the leash in the same way we saw Egwene do, and thus have to be beaten down even harder.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're broken, they're really broken. And then you have Olivia, who didn't necessarily have to be broken because she grew up in it. She grew up with the ingrained belief that I must be leashed. I deserve to be leashed. This is my place. So now, do we really trust her that she says, I recognize that that was wrong now? But I think Olivia becomes more interesting from our point of view, or yours especially later on when we start to see her a little more, because there is
Mm-hmm.
definitely an interesting element that happens there where she becomes a
Oh,
stronger, more
it was
independent
Olivia that
ally.
was 400 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew I read 400 years old somewhere. Yeah, which is funny
And
because I didn't catch it the first couple times I read it, because in my head I always had they describe her with the dark hair and everything, and I had a young woman in mind. But even someone who can channel that's 400 years old is still going to look over middle aged.
mhm. Yeah, and is considerably not just stronger, considerably stronger than Nynaeve. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, we're talking like well, Nynaeve's as strong as Grindel. So we're talking almost Lanfear level, who was the strongest woman.
Hmm. She was one of the few women that were stronger than even some of the strong men.
You know what? Start going on with your point, and I'll look up her strength. I got the cheat book.
Okay. Well, that was my main point is the the difference in the way that they were captured, I think is an interesting clue to how they're the ones that kind of come about being the first to say, "Hey, I'm ready to be unleashed now." But then also the concern with unleashing them. Uh, my final thought was I like the way the chapter ends with after Nynaeve says, "All right, this is what we're gonna do," and uh Lan says Tishar Manetheren softly, and Nynaeve's mouth fell open, then curled into a tremulous smile. Sudden tears glistened in her eyes as she spun to face him, her face joyous. Um,
Well, even before that, this is where Jordan is problematic. The mansplaining. He
mhm.
spoke up to give the sense of what they were talking about.
Yeah. Well, he speaks up to break the ice because someone's got to do it because they're all rather uncomfortable about it. But somebody's got to break that ice. And I think it's doubly I think Lan is being both personal and professional there. That I'll take the heat for my wife, Aes Sedai, who I know has got to be thinking that this is a hard decision, but she's going to want to do this. So let me be the one to take the initial uh uh heat for bringing it up.
Okay, so it's official. Olivia, according to Jordan's own rating system for the power, is a 1 plus 12, which is the way you have to read. It's a kind of a long section on how he did the power ratings, but and Lanfear is a 1 plus 12.
So
So
she's as powerful as Lanfear.
she's as powerful as Lanfear. So she is equal to the strongest woman ever. So officially, she's the strongest woman ever. Or she's the strongest woman existing, since we know Sindane isn't as powerful as Lanfear was.
Yep. Um,
Which I think by his ratings make her only second to Rand, Moradin, Robin.
Demandred, I think.
Demandred was under Rand
Okay.
and Robin. Robin was the strongest in the power
Mm,
of the Forsaken.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we get to a cup of tea.
Yes,
Uh,
and we revisit Forkroot again.
again.
Again. You'd think they'd learn their lesson.
Yeah, but so this is kind of a um so one of the reasons my brain is mush is I finally finished watching season 3 of Witcher last night. And one of my criticisms in especially in the early episodes was the magical way people just showed up and there's no sense of scale anymore. And it's like, oh, Geralt's here because he needs to be. Ciri's here because she needs to be. Now this guy's here because he needs to be. Uh, there's a moment in time where Forkroot starts to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's like Bale Doman.
yeah,
He's, how do we get these characters? We'll Doman it.
people don't think it do be as it do, but it do. Um, on the other hand, when you're dealing with an arms race that once something like this becomes uncovered, it will spread quickly. It may take a while for it to spread or for it to become uncovered, but once it is, it'll spread quickly because it has to, because this is the only way to reliably, safely deal with channelers. And so you kind of had to know that um doubly so for the dark because the the shadow got it from two separate sources. It would have gotten it um from their people in Saladar when Nyneave and Elayne explained to them what's going on. And then you got it from the tower because Alviarin is going to have seen the reports after the botched kidnapping attempt. So once they know about it, I feel like it does make sense that it might have taken a little time for people to find it and find it in enough quantity to be able to use it. But yeah, at this point, um uh the protagonist should be a little more wary of this stuff. Um because this isn't exactly the first time.
Well, and you think back to real life people in these situations way back in the day, they had tasters,
Hmm.
especially if you had a secession going on where
Hmm.
people would want you not well.
Um the only other things really about this chapter that kind of jump out at me is that they find out about the army in Bramewood, the Borderlander army, and of course, Elaine's first thought is, it's Rand, and there's more headaches that he's giving me here.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't gloss over what's his face? Mellar coming in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan first proving her loyalty as she jumps up to physically defend Elayne from a guy with a knife. Um, and then Marlar comes in like a hero in a bloody gleeman's tale, as Burgundy will say.
Mm-hmm. Well, he threw his sword across the room and hit the guy
Mm,
between the shoulder blades. So, swords aren't meant to be thrown.
yeah. So I mean, of course, we learned some things about Malar later, but for now, man, that's pretty badass. Whatever the circumstances, you to actually be able to do that and pull it off, that's a pretty big deal. All right.
Well, and basically killed another man with his bare hands.
Mm-hmm. Um, I like I like the setup of this chapter. This is one of the more fun Elayne chapters because of there's like a triple M. Night Shyamalan twist because he keeps at the end of the chapter he changes perspective a couple of times. So it's there's like different plans that are succeeding, and it's aha, you know, uh, uh, Elayne has a brilliant idea, and now she's got a plan, and now Egwene's got her plans, and then uh-oh, and then at the end we see, oh, but a lot of this was the part of a group of dark friends, and their plan has succeeded.
Oh, gotta go back for a second. There was a nugget in there that I wanted to see if you saw. It was with the crusty old guy, Nori, the first clerk,
Yeah.
and they were talking about Rand. And what did he say? Did you see the biblical reference there?
No, was this in the previous chapter?
It's in the cup of tea because
Okay.
she's talking to the clerk. Okay, yeah, and they're talking about Rand and speculating if he was dead or if he went to the tower and everything. It's on page 239. He said, "I myself would not believe him dead unless I sat 3 days with the corpse."
Mm, I had not seen that, but yeah, I remember that. Okay. Um, chapter
Oh,
10. And then we'll have to decide if we want to move on from this because there's a big chunk of Rand next, I believe. Um, yeah. Okay. All right. So what about chapter 10 jumps out at you?
I was hoping for a little play-by-play on what.
Well, we get Elayne waking up and realizing what had happened, uh, and then being informed the details of what happened, the being fork rooted, and then guys with poison blades came in, and then Millar came in to save the day. Um,
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I was already ahead to the Egwene stuff. Uh,
ah,
no, no, no. The banter here is more of what we talked about in the first chapter we talked about today, the
mhm.
streets chapter. Birgitte and Avienda, though, being kind of on the same page, Nynaeve talking over them. And I do like when Nynaeve puts them in their place and then leaves, they start speaking up like they're being defiant, but she's already gone.
Elayne notes
And
that
Elayne
they
notes that in
waited
her
until the
head.
door was shut before they said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and also Elayne talking about the little bro code Brigitte and Avienda have going.
mm,
I'll give this signal, blah blah blah. You do this, you do that, and she's like, "That's weird." And I'm just like, "Yeah, because you've been pampered all your life. You didn't have to like, you know,
mhm.
not get stuck by a knife here and there."
Yep. Um,
Though with Avienda, it's a little bit off because she lived in a culture where you there's so much on trust, but because that's kind of more of a like a everybody, you're skeptical about everybody tactic that they're
Hmm.
doing.
Yeah. Um, they have very much a always prepare for the worst, so your surprises are pleasant ones mentality, just as a culture. And
Mm-hmm.
you actually hear that kind of echoed from time to time when we're first meeting them, especially with Rourke when they're planning and talking. Um, all right. So you'd moved on to where they finally meet Egwene.
Yeah, and this is where my readings aren't as recent. So,
Um,
but I guess before we get too far, this is where it would have been a reach for Melar to take charge that fast.
hmm,
But I think that contrast between the man kind of having to be the big man comes in where it's like, yeah, I'm going to have 20 of these guards around me, but this guy was pretty damn competent. And
hmm.
I think that added the exclamation point in her mind that makes that believable, that somebody she's never met except for vaguely seeing him save her life uh kind of pushes her in that direction.
Yeah, but there's also the politics of rewarding someone who did something uh so heroic and saved the queen of the she also talks about the politics of m making sure that it's seen that that man is rewarded and rewarded big.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do like um I like Egwene in these moments when she's not being a queen bee. She's just demonstrating uh uh her mastery of the situation and of her powers. There's it's a very different scene than when she bullied Nynaeve, and we talked about that back when when it happened. Um, and the good and the bad there. Uh, but so on page 265, when Egwene showed up and she's talking, so halfway down, there's this moment where she's talking to them, and then a backless armchair appeared behind Egwene, and she sat without looking for it. Um, and just Elayne and Nynaeve noticed. I mean that is meaningful to them because they're still trying to work that out, and Egwene now does it without thinking. Um, and she's also got a good handle on her situation, and then she comes up to speed pretty quick about you know what's going on with them and the ramifications of all they're telling her. Um, I like the way she phrases where is it? Yeah. Nynaeve saying, I thought you had the hall of the tower under your thumb now. That's very much like having a ferret under your thumb, Egwene said dryly. It twists and writhes and wriggles around to nip at your wrist. Um, so even though she is doing her best Cincinnatus impression, she still doesn't have total authority. Um, and where the downside to this scene though is we do see it some later, but I feel like this is one of those moments where Jordan does more telling than showing. We hear from Egwene, we hear her complaining about the hall to Elayne and Nynaeve. We don't as much subsequently see her struggles with it. And I'm wondering if he did that on purpose of, well, I showed you struggling, showed you her maneuvering and her kind of Machiavellian bent, her and Sawan maneuvering the hall to where they wanted it to be, so I don't need to dwell on that anymore.
Well, it's fitting, and again to get us canceled, that they call her mother, because look at a mother's interaction with their, especially like a son. They're trying to, you need to do this and this and this and this and this and this, da, 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 and everything is laid out and orderly, and But you know what? The son's still got his Playboy under his mattress, and he's wiggling around like the ferret in a thing, doing what you told him, but trying to get away with
Pushing
as
the
much as
edges
you
as
can.
much as
Yeah,
possible. Yeah.
pushing the edges as much as possible. I guess you don't have a Playboy under the mattress anymore, but uh,
All right. All right. So 267. Do we want to dwell on this? Because this gets back to um, our three-way with Scott Giggity. Oh no. About yelling about Egwene because she brings up the oath rod here again. And this was where a lot of people back in the day and today on the forums had a big problem. Um, and there was a lot of speculation that she was being manipulated by Halima. Um, Especially when you see her, and we kind of touched on it a little bit of when you see Halima massaging her headaches away,
mhm,
and it's a little too um magical. Hint, hint, nudge,
mhm.
nudge. And so there was a lot of speculation of is Halima messing with Egwene's mind? Is that what her sudden change here is about? And that's why I was making the point with Sawan's soliloquy on why the three oaths matter, that it wasn't a sudden change. This she has been becoming more and more Aes Sedai since she's had to assume that position of authority, one, and then two, being under Sawan's tutelage. Because Sawan is very much a Aes Sedai's Aes Sedai. The tower matters to her more than just about anything. As much as she personally wants revenge against Elaida for what she personally did to her, more than anything, Sawan wants Elaida brought down because of the damage Elaida's doing to the tower.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, there are good points about making it to where you can only the publicity of making it to where you couldn't lie, or you couldn't make weapons, or you couldn't kill unless you were
Mm-hmm.
unless it's truly self-defense. But we see with the Blockaja, there's loopholes. And when you have a loophole in a system that's considered guaranteed, you become blind to the loophole.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with Jaito. The Aiel keep getting fooled by bad Aiel or bad people because they assume that you're telling the truth and you have honor. Well, if you're a dark friend, your honor is basically your devotion to being a dark friend. And then you throw all that out the window, and you can talk about that with any society. There, the people who are going to game the system are the bad actors every time. And if you have a system where you assume the truth is being spoken, then so I'm with Nyneave and Elayne here, because we need to create some sort of honor system without cutting our lives in half.
I'm sympathetic to Egwene's point, though, that she doesn't do a very good job explaining it like Sawan does. Um, that the O's are what make us Aes Sedai. They're what bind us together as
Pub-
a group
Publicly, it's
publicly.
yeah, it's a paper tiger though. When we all come down to it, and why would you cut your life in half for a paper tiger? There are other ways, like actually having integrity in your dealings with countries. That would be a good start.
Well, and you see an acknowledgement of that uh as they go on. Or was it, yeah, so page 268, 269, and they actually get into the details a little bit of it because, for instance, Nyneave brings up, I think it's Nyneave who brings up, well, we don't even know what that would do to someone who's already way older than the oath rod usually allows. Are they if Rienne swears on the oath rod, is she immediately going to drop dead because she's 400 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Egwene makes the point that, look, I'm not going to demand all channelers swear on the oath rod, but if you're going to be Aes Sedai, you will, because that's what Aes Sedai means. For
Mm-hmm.
3,000 years, that is what it has meant.
Well, this is where Egwene starts to Egwene too. Just the
Hmm.
way she said that. I don't ask
Hmm.
anything. It's an order, and yeah.
It is.
Well,
It's
and it's
back to your point about
specifically to who she's talking to,
yeah.
because this wasn't a statement about Rian or any of the others. This was a statement to Nynaeve and Elayne. You're not an Aes Sedai unless you do this. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. And I'm sorry if I'm Nynaeve right here. I'm like, look, little girl who I taught since you were in diapers. You're not seeing sense. And this is again, this is where Egwene becomes Egwene. She's the tyrant at this point. I'm not asking you to do this. You're going to
Is
do
that
this.
she's not a complete tyrant though, in that there is a fig leaf here in this of, and that's where I think we go back to your point about that it's right it's appropriate that she's called mother because it's sit down and behave because I said so. Um, all right, but now that you're sitting down and behaving, I will explain to you why. And so she does offer the fig leaf of being released from the rod, retiring into the kin, that kind of thing. So she's still not fully old school Aes Sedai, but she is becoming more institutionalized.
I still think she's being tyrannical here because this to me is like the vaccine mandates. No, you don't have to take the vaccine, but to keep your job, you do.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
you don't know the permanent damage of the oath rod. You can unswear from it. Well, how many years did you take off your life? We don't know this. They haven't studied that.
yeah. Do you just get to go on now as if it never happened, or do you still have that effect? Yeah, that's all brought up, and
Probably not, because we have an
don't know.
example of that. Someone who has been released from it, Cadsuane, and she looks like a granny. She's still healthy, but she's gray haired and all of these things, and she's not as
Do we
old.
know that Cadsuane has been released from the Oath Rod?
She mentions it at some point because that's what she retired or whatever. I thought she mentioned it.
I'm pretty sure.
Well, possible spoiler there, but I'm pretty sure she says something about not being
I'll look
part,
that
not
up in a
being,
minute.
yeah. But that's one of the reasons she's older than most. But she also is like physically older than these other women we're finding out are 300 or 400 years old. Because
Hmm.
Cadsuane's only like what 300 something years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if that was a spoiler, I apologize.
Let's see. Oh, then we get Halima's masterful headaches because I don't know if he did that on purpose or not, but I feel like that's Jordan purposely wanting to drive the debate crazy that after this big contentious um uh tyrant moment from Egwene, and now I'm going to throw in here at the end about Halima and her magical massages helping my headaches. Giggity. Um, and then we get that people are spying on them, and one of them could have been Rand's uncle. I wonder who that could be. And then there was someone that we weren't paying attention to. Uh, but we know there was a second watcher, and I don't know if we ever find out who that was. And then they go to blaming Rand some more, and then it switches to the Dark Friends, and we find out about this little group of Dark Friends uh doing something in the palace. And then we've got a group from that are Malkidian's leftovers. Oh, that's who was spying on them. That's right. Um, a man
Oh,
who let them see him and someone else I could not see. Um, so now we have this group of Malkidian's leftovers still working, and then so their plan is succeeding, and now we get the last plan of dun dun dun, where we find out that Malar is a dark friend, and that whole thing was a setup to get to be closer to the queen. All right, let's pause there for a second. All right, so on to a little bit of spoilery talk and then the comments. Um, did we have any spoiler things that we brought up besides the Catswin thing?
Cadsuin, I talked about the strength of the power of the people involved, and I went ahead and looked that up. And yes, I was right. Ravine and Moradin and Rand are all, by his scale, what is ++1, which is the strongest you could be. And Demandred was ++2, which is one step weaker. The higher the number, the weaker you are. It's like golf.
Okay.
But that was my disappointment when I read that before when I was looking through the cheat book. Is Robin was probably the most powerful Forsaken if he would just use it.
Hmm.
But he just tried to out finesse him. He basically what we called getting too cute with your technique.
All right. Was there anything else?
Cadswin, I looked it up and it was bouncing around as a fan theory. Uh, and some idiot put also Bella is Cadswin, but that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's apparently a popular fan theory, but uh, I'd have to really sift through it to see if it ever got resolved. So we'll have to just keep a lookout for it.
I thought that was something that I'm looking for. I thought Jordan had answered that specifically on occasion. But now that I think about it, I think he may have answered it obliquely, in a way that suggested, well, maybe she was bound by some kind of oath, but not necessarily the three oaths.
When she
All
looks
right.
older, but she doesn't look. I mean, Van Deen is so much older than she is.
I don't think anyone ever comments that they don't have the ageless look, though. So I'm pretty sure she has the ageless look. So she is bound by oaths, but I think there was some wiggle room there that might have allowed that, maybe she unbound herself and then swore different oaths.
Yeah, I'm not seeing.
Anyway,
I'm not seeing anything in these message boards other than
yeah,
the
I'll have to dig
speculation.
back in some of the older things. Um,
Let's see the comments. One thing about your comments regarding sea folk, it assumes there is a genuine need for silk from Shara rather than it being a luxury. My only comment to that is look through the history of the entire world and what is the one thing that always holds its value? Gold. Name a use for gold other than luxury and decoration, realistically.
yeah, up until the modern electronic age, there wasn't a real use for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the minds of wealthy merchants and nobles, it is a necessity, and you
Mm-hmm.
actually see that, like, Elayne especially thinks and talks a lot about needing to look like you're in charge as well as act like you're in charge.
Well, and as long as there's a market, necessity becomes the word, right? As long as people will pay
Hmm.
enough for it, if you're a merchant, necessity is the key. I mean,
Yeah.
it is there.
All right. What else?
The next comment was
Oh
sometimes I
yeah.
wonder if Jordan changed Perrin because he had made him too heroic in The Shadow Rising. It's Rand's journey, and he created a character in Perrin that would compete with the protagonist for audience sympathy and attention. We've kind of touched on this before that I thought that maybe Jordan wrote him too good in book
Yeah.
4 and it ruined everything after that. But I was thinking about that after I had read that comment. Uh, when you're writing something this expansive, he may have just had a disconnect. he may have had notes about what was supposed to happen in these in what we call the slog,
Mm,
and didn't even realize that he had resolved all of that. And so he just kept writing as if he was still struggling with the same damn thing as he's going forward. When he could have actually still had him have internal struggles, and they just would have been different. I think the problem we're having is he's regressed.
hmm
And so yeah, I think he did write him too well in the Shadow Rising to have this plot. Now, whether he tried to regress him or not, versus just forgetting that he wrote him so good or accidentally having written him so good, was is the question. And then we're talking about intent of a dead person, and we can't really,
yeah,
the fact that it's there we can comment on, but why he did it, or what was the thought process behind it, is going to be a little bit different question. But no, I agree. He resolved him too well in book 4 to have a 14 book series to have him as a main character. Now, if it was because he was taking too much attention, I would say no, because first of all, we have a whole book without him in book 5. And then we have everybody just falling in love with Matt during that time.
hmm I hadn't really thought of this before, but it this may have been part of his plan, of his, overall idea and structure of the
It it
flow
did
of the storylines.
it did remind me of this meme though.
Yes. Okay. Um, but you can have a character that's too good and it doesn't necessarily distract from the protagonist, especially since that's kind of been the point since the beginning, is these archetypes that, Perrin is the more, in D&D terms, lawful good. He's the more black and white. Uh, uh, Matt is the more happy-go-lucky, um, do whatever's in the moment. And then Rand is the one that's kind of in between. He has to kind of balance these worlds of, it can't just be happy-go-lucky all the time, but it's also not always just black and white. And I think that was maybe the point of putting Perrin in this situation, because here you have probably the most morally black and white, at least of the main characters. Um, you'd have to, in the side characters, you'd have to go find uh
Khaled.
Khaled to have a
Yeah.
more black and white character. Um, and now you've dropped him in this very messy gray area, in this, in this chunk of the world where everything is a mess, and he's got to navigate uh what what he wants to do, what he thinks he is supposed to do, and what he feels is the right thing to do, with all these other voices talking to him and pulling him in different directions. I think that may have been part of the point of dropping Perrin where he put him, for this chunk of the series.
Because he needed to be in chaos. Uh, and good and evil aren't the right way to frame it. Straight laced isn't the right way to frame it. It's parents struggle with logic and emotion,
Hmm.
because he up until this point he was the blacksmith puzzle. He was playing chess, not poker. And now he's been put in a spot where randomness has taken his chess game away, basically, and he's overreacting in the opposite direction. He's always struggling with, do I let my emotions take over me? But no, I'm slow. I like to stop and I like to think about things. But now he's not stopping and thinking. He's just wanting to smash.
hmm
Where Galad is the better example of good versus evil, except his dilemma is when he's confronted with multiple goods. And when there's multiple goods that conflict each other, he struggles. Like what he did with for Elayne and Nyneave in, was
hmm
it Johanna? And he got the boat for him, even though that was the wrong thing to do in one way, but it was the right thing to do in
Well,
another.
yeah. Well, when they first meet him, before that, when they first meet him and find out he's one of the children now, then Elaine convinces, "Oh, we've got to run away quickly," because that's the way she phrases it, is Galad is being confronted with something he's never been confronted before in his life, which is two things that he finds equally right, but in direct conflict with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Protecting me, his sister, and sworn authority figure too. as the crown princess. So protecting me is the right thing to do. But he's a child of the light now. Turning me in is the right thing to do because that's the law. Does not
Ye-
compute in Galad's mind. It's hard for him to figure that out.
Well, and he gets to that later in his story arc, which is, I think, one of the better sub character story arcs,
Hmm.
where now he's got to not only break what was the law, but he's got to basically command a mutiny. And he does it in the most honorable way possible, but at the same time, he still has to take
You know,
that.
that makes me think that in a lot of ways, Galad's story arc is the story arc Perrin's was supposed to be, but it just got too big and messy.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's any surprise that Galad is part of Perrin's grounding coming up. When he kind of comes back to himself a little bit is when Galad kind of comes into the picture as well. But there was a comment in the end of the last book or the beginning of this one. Is this the first time we saw Elayne in Winter's Heart?
I think so.
Okay, so then it was the end of the last one then, where Birgitte talks about Gawain coming back and being her first prince
Yes.
consort and captain of the guard and everything. And how much better would of an impression would we have of Gawain if that was what happened?
Oh, it's in the prologue of this because
As in the
remember
prologue of this,
we get a
yeah,
scene
and
there
yeah,
in the prologue.
we would have not had all of the simp stupid shit that we get here coming up with Egwene. Egwene
Hmm.
ruins everything. She ruined Gawain. I'm blaming her. I'm blaming her because he could have come back, been prince consort, take a little pressure off Birgitte, helped his sister out, his hometown, his home country, been a patriot. But no, he has to simp around for the tower and then Egwene
Hmm.
doing bad shit because that's what his people did for Elida. Bad stuff.
He's kind of he's the other side of the coin. He's the two-faced side of the coin there of Galad. I hadn't thought about that before, that he's supposed to be the noble one, the do good, not just do what's right, but do good. And he gets sucked into constantly doing bad because he gets on, as much as he's criticized Galad, he gets in a track like Galad's, but he's even more rigid than Galad is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the tale of two cities. We get with Galad someone you initially are supposed to think this guy's not even that interesting because he's just like you said the lawful good. He's the boring character. He's
Hmm.
the stiff uh the square of the group. But then he progresses and becomes a human being. Where Gawain is the guy that comes out the gate like, "Oh, he's the everyman. You love him. He's a prince, but he's just like us." And then he just gets dumber and he regresses in lessons as he
Hmm.
goes forward.
Yeah. Yep. I will get into that a lot when we get to the Sanderson books because in some ways, I feel like that may be a more egregious character assassination than what happened to Matt in that first book. Because what Matt was doing wasn't really the problem, it was how he wrote his thoughts and his dialogue, because he didn't really have a good grasp of that part of Matt.
Well, I still
Um,
think going to the front of the battle and all that was what he was doing. So that was not written well.
I meant more in the macro sense, yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
meant just kind of
but
the overall arc.
also no surprise since Sanderson really loved Perrin that actually one of the characters he wrote pretty well was Galad because again you're
Mm,
getting that kind of
that's a good point.
orderly straight-laced kind of struggle.
All right, well, that's all I have got that my brain can come up with.
Yep, that's all I got for today. We'll get through some Rand and Matt. Finally back to Matt coming up. I'll have my cowboy hat ready.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of stuff if we do both the Rand and Matt stuff next time, which I think we can do because um there's three really long chapters of Rand, but the most important thing in it is the giggity time.
Mhm.
Um and so we may jump we'll probably jump mostly to that, and then we'll see if there's anything else uh in those three chapters. So Actually, if there's any Scott, if there's anything in those 3 chapters that you find interesting, comment on it, uh, so that we can focus on it. Because otherwise, we're mostly going to be talking about Rand going to Camelin and the bonding, and then the snoo time with Elayne.
Yeah, I already have a meme for that one too.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah,
All
and then
right.
we'll see. I can't remember how long the chunk after that of Matt is, but I think it's pretty lengthy. So if we can get through all of that,
But is it
uh,
girthy? That's the question.
um, if we can get through all of that next time, we will have made a really deep dent into this book and the uh my hope of getting through this before I have to suffer through season 2, which is coming up pretty quick here.
Well, remember we've extended that a week for us because I won't be in
Oh yeah.
town for the first, so we'll probably wait till the second weekend there
Hmm.
to watch that. And also in the future, remember I'm going to be in Germany from like the 15th through the something of September. So we may have to pre-record or
Okay.
just take a little break uh for that week because I will be on a time delay and probably not be able to Zoom anyways. So
All right. Well, we will see y'all then.
all right, later guys.